Good afternoon, televiewers of 7 News Television. This is another program 7 News has produced for you, known as Experts. The edition, this moment, we handle or talk about some issues regarding corruption in our environment. We all know corruption is one of the ills that destabilize the country, that send the economy of the country down the drain. And by so doing, it helps the economy, growth of the country to be backwards. This afternoon, an expert from Transparency International, the executive director of this international non-governmental organization that handles issues regarding corruption, is going to talk to us. He's no other person than Luken Nyasi Chakunte. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Taka.
And welcome to 7 News.
Thank you very much, sir.
So, who is Mr. Luken Nyasi Chakunte?
Mr. Luken Nyasi Chakunte is just a young Cameroonian that believes that corruption is a real problem in our country and in our society, and that since for the past 5 years I've been involved in the fight against corruption in this country through the organization he works for, which is Transparency International in Cameroon.
We are talking about corruption in the environmental sector. What is corruption and how is it involved in this environmental sector?
Yes, the expert will tell you that there is no single definition of corruption.
Okay.
You have the World Bank that has its own definition of corruption. You have other organizations. But for Transparency International, corruption is the abuse of entrusted power for private gain.
Okay.
So for us, we believe as far as you receive the power from delegate to handle public affairs, you should not use that position to take advantage at the detriment of the population.
So, from you, somebody working with Transparency International, and you've been fighting corruption, we are talking about the environment. How is this manifested in the environmental milieu?
Corruption in the environment, we just need to go back to the rural communities. There's usually this popular say that says the richest local councils are the poorest in infrastructure.
Okay.
Why? Because you realize that those local council receives, in terms of forests, royalties, millions of franc CFAs, but the reality on the field is different. And one of the reasons we have such lack of local development is because of money being embezzled, money being used by local elites sometimes for their personal or for private interest. So we look at that. But talking about corruption also at the level of the environmental sector, we understand that the government receives support from the international community. Today we talk about mitigation strategy, we talk about attenuation strategy when we talk about climate change, for example. And polluting countries are contributing at the level of billions of dollars to save the planet. But unfortunately, these billions land in countries where corruption is still rampant or endemic. We just have to consult the Corruption Perception Index produced each year by Transparency International to understand the reality. So talking about corruption in the environmental sector also means looking at the reality, the level of governance in that country.
Okay. So what are the realities you're talking about here?
The realities, for example, we are in Cameroon, and I will say, for example, the government, the last Corruption Perception Index, the 2016, places Cameroon at the position of 145 on 176 countries.
Okay.
that have been assessed, with the average of 26 over 100 as the note.
The note.
So we see that we are far below the average, which is 50, which means that despite the effort being undertaken, because we must realize that that the government has been putting in place measures to fight against corruption, but it looks like corrupt practices are becoming the more and more sophisticated. So we need to continue the fight, but also be really productive and innovative in the way we approach the issue of fight against corruption.
During your introductory statements, you made mention of the rural environments. Let's go back to the rural environments. They are highly endowed with natural resources, but they remain the poorest milieu where anybody goes and grabs what he thinks is good for him and lets the people perish. How can this be handled in order that corruption should be kept completely?
I will say the first thing that it is important, and which we realize in the implementations of various activities of Transparency International, is that we identify a lack of people's engagement. People are not engaging in this fight against corruption. And beside the fact they are not engaging, they lack knowledge and tools on how to engage in this fight against corruption. And we know ignorance is a dangerous aspect when we talk about fighting against corruption. So it is important, first of all, to promote greater transparency.
Okay.
Transparency means making the information available, not only available but accessible,
Okay.
and in a format that could be understood by the villager, and engaging the villager in what they call participatory governance. Let him feel that he's contributing to the improvement of his local councils or of his country. In Transparency, we develop tools like the scorecards,
Okay.
where a citizens can actually give a grade to his mayor, if I can use the sentence.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, it helps the mayor understand or have the feedback of his citizens according to what he's doing on a daily basis. We also have tools like social audit. Communities coming together and say, oh, we talk generally of public investment budget.
That's right.
We talk about project being approved under that. It is the role of citizens, because the end of this public investment budget is to improve the living conditions. So if communities are not involved in auditing this project,
Yeah.
in monitoring this project, how do we ensure that the local elite, for those that are working for their own interest, will not go away with the money and leave the poor to die?
All right. The poor will not die because you people are doing everything to ensure that corruption is wiped away from Cameroon. Is there any trace or success that Transparency International has recorded with regards to corruption in the environmental milieu?
I will say in various aspects, but we are focusing today on environmental milieu.
Yeah.
What we realize is that we believe in strategic partnership
Okay.
to address this issue of corruption, and besides, we have been implementing for the past 3 years now a project called Red Plus Governance and Finance Integrity for Africa. And one of the key elements of this project was to work with communities. Work with communities to teach them about their rights
Yeah, right.
and tell them on how to monitor project for the well-being of the community. We went and organized several sensitization campaigns to that effect, to let them know about what is RED, what is red, reducing emission from deforestation and degradation, and how can they be involved? Because what we have to say is that community also play a role. They usually say for a project to be implemented, the community needs to be consulted and informed. There's what they call the FPIC, the free prior informed consent. Communities are at the heart of that too. So if they are not aware of that, and they are far away generally from Yaoundé, where they don't have this kind of information, so how are they going to be involved and know what is the stake of the community in this process? So we have been doing that, but we have also been producing or providing legal assistance, free legal assistance to community. I have to mention here that with a partnership with another civil society organization here in Cameroon called FODER, we set up what we call a normalized system for independent observations of forest, through which we allow communities to come as a group to report acts of illegal loggings, and then within the system everybody has his role to play, and within that concept Transparency International was in charge of the lobbying and advocacy aspect.
Okay, viewers of 7 News Television, you are watching Experts, your program. We are talking about corruption in the environmental sector and red loss. Brice Gozok was our eyes and ears during the agro-pastoral youth promotion program. We are going to find out from him if it's really a success or a myth. Brice Gozok.
Le programme de promotion de l'entrepreneuriat agro-pastoral des jeunes, en abrégé PIA Jeunes, fait bien partie de ces projets camerounais qui donnent le tournis à tout expert. Lancé pourtant en grande trompe en février 2015, le plan agricole d'un coût estimé à plus de 33 milliards de francs CFA sur une période allant de 2015 à 2021, qui visait à donner aux plus de 78% de jeunes que représente cette tranche au sein de la population camerounaise une voie relative à la formation des métiers agro-pastoraux, mais est de plus en plus visible dans de nombreuses salles UP des hôtels de Yaoundé, comme ici ce mois de janvier 2018, lors de cette 4e session du comité de ce concept.
Le PA Jeune ne s'intéresse pas seulement aux maillons production. Le PA Jeune s'intéresse à tous les maillons qu'on peut développer le long de la chaîne des valeurs, les 10 filières ciblées, c'est-à-dire les services en passant par la production, la transformation et la commercialisation. Tout jeune qui peut monter un projet dans l'un des maillons, je dis bien des services jusqu'à la commercialisation, ces maillons sont éligibles au PA Jeune.
Un nouveau déballage des actions menées avec tout autour les mêmes autorités gouvernementales, donnant l'illusion de saisir avec pertinence les résultats affichés de plus de 12 000 jeunes formés au cours des 3 premières années par les responsables de ce projet, alors qu'aucune suite n'a été donnée à la campagne d'acquisition des sites d'incubation dans plusieurs localités du pays, à l'instar de celles opérées ici dans le département du Mbam et Inubu.
À mon avis, en tant que membre du comité de pilotage, il y a pas mal d'améliorations déjà sur la forme de présentation de documents, sur le fond même. Et certes, il y a eu certains points sur lesquels nous enregistrons encore une faible taux de réussite. Je peux dire, après les explications dans la salle, que ça ne demande pas vraiment, ça ne dépend pas vraiment des techniciens au PAGE, mais je pense que ça va dans le très bon sens.
Des prémices d'un éléphant blanc sans grand lendemain pour la jeunesse camerounaise semblent se dessiner dans ce projet PIA Jeunes, pourtant bien conçu.
The impact of climate.
Thanks, Brice Gozo, for that report. At least we have been enlightened concerning the Youth Agro-Pastoral Promotion Program. Fellow viewers, if you are just switching on your television, this is your program known as Experts. With us, we have the Executive Director of Transparency International Cameroon, who is going to enlighten us about corruption in the environmental sector and reckless. Mr. Luke Nyasi Chakunte will just follow that report talking about Agro-Pastoral Youth Promotion Program. You are an expert in corruption in every aspect, but today we are talking about corruption in the environmental sector. That is a report. How will you advise the Cameroon government to ensure that corruption is taken away from the youth environment?
Yes, I think one of the important issue and key pillars when we talk about good governance is transparency.
Right.
This project is, I believe from the report, a very good project. But my question is, what are the criteria
Okay.
for selecting those
Yes,
youth?
yeah.
Because we now talk about the agriculture of second generation. We now talk about inviting youth to the land, but erase other issues. I will tell you, maybe we are talking about environment, but we are also implementing a project
Okay.
titled Land and Corruption
Yeah.
in Africa, and realize that youth face many problems in having access to land.
Right.
And one of the blockades, if I can call it like that, is corruption. Corruption in the administration environment. And maybe the fact that the legal framework do not allow those youth to easily have access to land when we talk about young girl, when you look at customs and traditions. So the project is good, but the project should also take into considerations other elements, access to land, and issue of corruption. What are the criteria? Where are they published? And is there a greater transparency in the process of attributing this? I don't know if these grants, I don't know if they are grants
Yeah.
to the youth for this specific project, because it is important to know. If not, if we are in a situation where there might be nepotism or favoritism, there is a risk
Yeah.
that the project will not produce the expected result, and we will be in the situation where we start from the beginning again.
We are talking of corruption in the environmental sector. What can really be the cost? The costs. What will it cost a government if the environment or the administration is that corrupt?
Yes, transparency yet at the level of Cameroon. I have not undertaken that study, and maybe it would have been is a good study to conduct to understand the cost of corruption in the environmental sector. But we have at the international level data. So I was able to go through, because I guessed you are going to ask me the question. So I just read something I had. The World Bank estimates up to US $23 billion
Wow.
worth of wood illegally cut each year. Each year.
Billion dollars.
Dollars. This result in loss of US $10 billion. That is the cost each year in the forest sector, according to the World Bank. So these are some data generally transparency used and work to raise awareness.
Okay.
Because with the World Bank, they have specialists in corruption, environmental issues, and all the rest, and they can provide key data. But at the level of the cost of corruption, maybe in Cameroon, it is difficult to say unless we raise the issue. But yet, There is a civil society organization each year that publishes what they call the evaluation of the intensity of corruption in the forestry sector. So unfortunately I could not get the latest data, but I think for the past 2 years, the country, the intensity was still high, looking at the report. So, but in terms of billion or million of CFA, we cannot yet estimate the cost of corruption in our country, and taking from you will be a good idea to look at that.
All right, that's right. Who are those really affected by corrupt practices or corruption in this environmental milieu?
The citizens. The citizens at all levels, because in a country like Cameroon, with 22 million hectares of forest, being in the Congo Basin region, forest represents an important element in the country's resources. And we just have to look at all those projects implemented by donors such as Red Plus, Voluntary Partnership Agreement, FLECT, clean development mechanisms dating back to the 1990s, and all these are bringing in money. Yet we have money to save our forest, part of the forest, but we also gain money from exploiting part of that forest. So at the end of the day, it should reflect on the living condition of the citizens. Worst are the local communities living around this forest, and for those local communities, the forest is the pharmacy. It's where they get the food, and it is important that the projects put in place should first of all answer to their requests or improve their living conditions. That is why I said you'll be surprised to go to some local council, especially in the East region. You'll be amazed to see what is their budget or what they gain from forest royalties or revenues, as they used to call it. And you will see a different world between the money being received and the development and the living condition of the people. So the first people affected are the communities, and then for the forest officials getting into corrupt practices, embezzlement and all the rest, the government is also affected because the money they were supposed to receive is less than what
is being sent to them.
Yes. So we have at different stages, depending on the interests and the actors involved, some that are affected at various degree.
Before the paper presented by Brice, we were talking about illegal logging. How is this practice in Cameroon?
So in the context of Cameroon, the illegal logging is very, let me say, sophisticated and funny at the same time. You have, for example, sometimes forest officials involved in that process. You have business operators that will come and without consulting the communities get into the bush and start cutting without having a logging permit. So, you know, illegal logging is a process that we need to look at very closely, because illegal logging, we usually say, is a catalyst of corruption. Yes. In the forestry sector or around the forests, we have several actors. We have one forest, several actors, different interests. According to the interest of one of the actors is ready to either pay, bribe, or influence to get what it wants. As far as the forest represents a huge potential in terms of money. Yes. So, and generally, like you said earlier, the most affected are the communities, because they have sometimes nobody to come and defend and intervene. So we also have local elites sometimes that becomes business operators. You are a mayor and you decide that, or a parliamentarian, you decide that, okay, I'm going to construct my logging company, because you are going to use your influence to get access to the land. We also what we call generally in rural area what they call community forest.
Community forest.
A community can come together and decide to keep the forest, and they also have the right to exploit that forest, but there's a legal framework for the exploitation. There are some species that should not be sold, but yet with some business operator, they still find a way to cut down those species. And there was a specific activity launched by the National Anti-Corruption Commission in the forestry sector. I think it dates back to 2012, what they call rapid result initiatives. It was funny how they explained to you that after leaving the forest, only the transport process is stained with corruption. That is from the forest to the port or for the final destination. And they were able to realize that this, despite the fact that some of these logging companies have all the required documents, they are still forced to bribe to have their road to pass. So corruption is not only in the forest. Corruption also intervenes in the law enforcement agencies, in the transport environment. So when we talk about, that is why I say corruption is like,
it is like a cancer to the society.
It's difficult to even find the word. They usually say, so if you allow me in French, dénominateur commun. So it is, it cut across many sectors, as far as they are involved in a specific process.
That is to say, if there is a good law that is put in place by the government, these corrupt practices might be reduced, right?
I agree with you, and that is what Transparency have been advocating since. Since the creation of Transparency in the year 2000, we have been calling for the enactment of an anti-corruption law, within which we have elements for the protection of whistleblowers. Because the problem in our environment is that there are people that are against corruption, but they are not motivated because they don't feel protected. We have been calling also for the application of Article 66 of the Constitution on the Declaration of Assets, which is an important element. We talk about official handling huge sum of monies, and they must be accountable for. So we have those legal dispositions. We have them in our constitutions, but we need to implement them if we want to really raise this and solve this issue of corruption.
Thanks very much. The Executive Director of Transparency International, Cameroon, fellow viewers of 7 News Television, Stephanie Agnew, had a report talking about climate change, a book presented by Konrad Adenauer Foundation to intellectuals or experts of environmental law from African universities. Stephanie Agnew would like to get that from you.
The impact of climate change law on the principle of state sovereignty over natural resources. C'est le titre du livre dédicacé au terme de la conférence sur les lois environnementales en Afrique, organisée par the Association of Environmental Law Lecturers from African Universities, en abrégé ACELAW, et le programme sur la politique climatique et la sécurité énergétique pour l'Afrique subsaharienne de la Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Publié par les éditions Nomos en Allemagne, cet ouvrage donne des orientations sur les lois à appliquer sur le respect de l'environnement, dont la quintessence est présentée ici par des conférenciers, en lieu et place du principal auteur absent.
6 panels with different legal discussions on climate change, on natural resources, on energy, on water, on land, on marine. And I cannot put this in a nutshell. This is something which is going to be generated into a publication which will come out later this year and which we will make available at universities and libraries throughout the continent.
Le docteur Oliver Ruppel, directeur de la Konrad Adenauer Foundation, a tenu à remettre aux différents professeurs d'universités d'Afrique présents à cette rencontre un exemplaire de ce recueil pour enrichir leurs connaissances.
That's the essence of our joy and respect for Konrad Foundation. This has been an historical problem, implementation of laws, and they have volunteered. Remember, this is a German foundation that identified one of the fundamental or vexed problems of governance in Africa.
Le document, résultat des travaux de recherche à l'adresse des chercheurs, généralement enseignants d'université, est de lecture peu compréhensible aux communs des lecteurs, malgré les qualités d'édition appréciables.
Thanks very much, Stephanie Onyo, for that excellent report talking about the book launch on climate change that's going to help the environmental lecturers of the African universities. Viewers, this is another edition of your program Experts. We are talking on corruption in the environmental sector and REDD+. With us at this point in time is the Executive Director of Transparency International Cameroon, who is throwing more light on issues of corruption in our society. Mr. Director, yes. You have just followed that report. We are talking about climate change, and you talk about REDD+. It is a mechanism that is trying to fight against the effects of climate change in our society. How is REDD+ mechanism applied in Cameroon?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think maybe before answering, I should maybe get to explain that climate change, generally we talk about, when we talk about fighting against climate change, we talk about mitigation strategies and attenuation strategies. Adaptation rather, mitigation and adaptation strategies. So now REDD+, which is reducing emission from deforestations and forest degradations, is found under the mitigation strategies. That is, this is a mechanism that is coming to try and fix or try and avoid us to get to a worse situation. So in the context of Cameroon, since 2005 the government has been involved in the process. They have developed several documents, the ERPIN, the Emission Rejection Project Idea Note, and then what they call the Register Preparation Proposal, which is called RPP. So actually the government is working for us we are following the process for a long time now. They are working on the REDD+ national strategy, which is going to be like the guiding elements or in the implementation of the REDD process. Just to say that the REDD itself is in 3 phases. We have the preparation, the implementation, and the payment phase.
Payment phase.
We are currently finalizing the first phase, which is the preparation phase, and then we go to the implementation. But at the level of Cameroon, the specificity, we have on the field specific projects that are trying to touch the three phases at the same time, so that we have enough elements to fit the country's national REDD+ strategy. So far, Transparency International has been working with the government, especially with the REDD+ Technical Secretariat, and raising especially issue linked to governance.
All right.
Good governance in the process. That is why we have published several research documents, one on mapping corruption risk in the REDD+ process, but also how to construct community rights within the context of REDD+, beside analysis being done on public finance and preparation to REDD+. All these studies have been put at the disposal of the ministry so that it will help in the reflection in elaborating the REDD+ strategy, but also fit in the Cameroon national documents regarding REDD+.
You made a statement that the whistleblower feel not protected, and that's why it's very difficult to denounce acts of corruption. And I know Transparency International has what is known as corruption no CCR, and you've done that in the hospitals. That works perfectly well. What is the hindrance, or what's hindering you people from taking that to the environmental milieu?
Yes, corruption no CCR it was a pilot project and a successful project. The aspect of corruption no CCR is bringing in technology. Technology to promote the fight against corruption, and then in that application we worked with a local civil society organization that actually helped us to design the platform, the online platform. Is that to have such a platform, we need to have access to internet. That is the reality. And when we talk about forestry sector, and generally the most affected are communities. Sometimes who do not have smartphone. When he said is access to internet, first of all, is a challenge in those communities, and having even access to a smartphone is still another challenge.
That's true.
So it would have been a good idea, but unfortunately these challenges cannot lead us to cannot encourage us to replicate the corruption no CCR experience in the forestry sector. But nevertheless, we believe, I mentioned what they call the normalized system for independent observation of forest, which is a good approach of having communities already trained by other organizations to monitor and map areas where they have identified illegal loggings. Yes. So they are also trained on drafting reports. So it's a whole process. Maybe the next time we are going to talk about that, or maybe I will direct you to the right organization to explain to you in details. Because it takes into consideration the fact that community do not have the appropriate communication tools for us to use technology to enable them to report illegal acts, illegal logging in their various communities.
So how is this FPIC going to help the government or the environment in which you live to fight against corruption?
The FPIC is more about engaging and consulting the populations. Like Mr. Takan, if I come to your village and I say, oh, I want to conduct a REDD+ project, you want to find out what is even REDD+ all about.
That's true.
What will be the benefits of the project for my communities? Is it going to create more jobs, or jobs for the children of the villages, or have I even been consulted to give my consent for this project to be implemented behind my house? And then the advantage is that it keeps away what they call conflict, because definitely conflict is one of the elements that could rise. And the FPIC is there to prevent any conflict between communities and project developers, or between communities and government agencies. So from the onstart, they are involved, aware of the project, involved in the implementation, concerned, and give their consent about, yes, we believe this project is important for us. And then you will be shocked to see how successful the project will be implemented. So the FPIC is more on a preventing conflict, situation of conflict that may rise because of lack of access to consultation and information by the communities.
You're talking of conflict. It sounds very interesting, and we know very well that for an individual or a group of people to get into conflict, especially when it concerns land, is because one of them is cheated.
Of course.
So how then will this FPIC or the government help in order to solve the problem of conflicts in the environmental milieu?
Yes, it's quite a difficult question.
Okay.
For not being an expert in conflict
management.
I would just say one of the important elements, that is why we say when an element is transparent, when we talk about, that is why we always insist on transparency. Access to information is very important, because when the communities have access to information, they have the time to study the information, ask questions, make requests, and then you have time to find common ground with the communities to ensure that the conflict do not even have a place. At the beginning. So if you believe, because you are the state or because you are a strong politician or local elite, you are going to dictate, definitely it's going to have conflict. We have seen several situations in the land sector where communities have their land grabbed, and they decide not to go because their land is their life.
That's true.
Yes.
You talked about the right to justice. Can you explain briefly how a community needs to have the right to justice, and who are they supposed to report to?
Yes, the right to justice is fundamental, especially when there is conflict. There's a case of conflict. And I think the communities themselves, there's a fact, access to justice has a cost, which sometimes is unbearable by the communities. And sometimes access to justice means leaving my village, walking 80 kilometers to the next court. So at the end, we talk about the most affected. So there's what we call generally grievance mechanisms that should be set at the level of traditional leaders. Having the traditional leaders to be involved on these conflict issues, not only thinking about conflict resolution in terms of bringing the issue to the court. Because we always had our traditional way of handling conflicts, and those traditional approaches must be studied and see how it could fit or complement or be complemented by the standard justice system, because at the end we cannot have a court of justice everywhere. So we need to find alternatives for those communities to find a solution to their grievances. And that is why transparency in 2010 put in place this project called Advocacy and Legal Advice Center,
Yeah.
where we provide free judiciary and legal assistance to affected individuals on issues of corruption. You'll be surprised, we received complaints from remote areas, but yet for lack of funding sometimes you cannot
get there.
But you understand that there's a real need for those citizens to have justice, and we could see how to put all these elements together and see how they match with each other's for the well-being of the citizens.
Thanks very much, Mr. Director.
You're welcome.
Televiewers of 7 News Television, there is this thing or this phenomenon, lack of water. Water, people say, is life, but there are communities out there who, to have access to potable water is like going down the sea to come out with a fish. Kongsamba is one of those towns in Cameroon where they find it very difficult to have water. Fabien Baga is going to tell us more about what happened in Kongsamba. Fagere.
Ouvrir un robinet à Ninon s'accompagne toujours de l'effet désagréable de ne pas voir de l'eau couler en abondance. Dans ce petit village situé dans le département du Mungo, les populations continuent d'avoir soif plusieurs années après la construction de ce château d'eau, loin d'être à la hauteur des attentes et aujourd'hui abandonné dans la brousse. L'histoire retient pourtant qu'un peu plus de 48 millions de francs CFA avaient été prélevés du budget d'investissement public en 2016 en vue de la réalisation d'un projet d'adduction d'eau dans ce village. Un projet finalement mal exécuté, au grand malheur des populations de Ninon 1 qui continuent de crier leur ras-le-bol à qui veut l'entendre.
L'entrepreneur dépassé parce qu'il cherchait la facilité, voulait faire des économies, a fait plutôt une connexion en direct, ce qui laisse constater que vraiment c'est une canalisation d'un coup d'eau. Ça soumet des populations au risque de maladie. Les populations sont entièrement mécontentes.
C'est donc une affaire sérieuse, à forte odeur de détournement de deniers publics, qui continue de faire jaser dans les chaumières. Le sujet a même été mis en débat dans cette salle des actes de la municipalité de Kongsamba 1er, à l'occasion de la réunion du comité départemental de suivi de l'investissement public pour le compte du 4e trimestre de l'année 2017.
Ils ont écrit à toute la République, disant qu'on a volé, on a détourné les projets, on a fait ceci, on a fait ça. Je fais quoi? Ils veulent quoi?
Nous avons compris.
Venez qu'on trouve des solutions, que vous ayez l'eau. Au lieu de vous plaindre partout, ceci, cela, donc venez on trouve des solutions. Pourquoi ils vont faire quoi? Je fais quoi avec ça?
Toujours est-il que les fils et filles de Ninon 1, tous soucieux du développement de leur village, ont à cœur de savoir ce que deviendra ce projet mal exécuté au moment où un nouveau budget d'investissement public a été lancé dans le département du Mungo.
Concernant les projets non exécutés, ils appellent un traitement particulier. Il est d'abord question pour nous de faire la situation avec les différents ingénieurs. Est-ce que le projet a arrêté? Est-ce qu'il a abandonné? Comment a-t-il été exécuté? Et maintenant, sur la base du diagnostic qu'on peut faire et puis des propositions pour sortir de la situation, notamment s'il faut poursuivre le projet, on peut adresser des sollicitations à la hiérarchie en termes de reprogrammation, en espérant qu'ils leur sauront que une suite favorable leur sera réservée.
Quoi qu'il en soit, le vœu le plus cher des habitants de Ninon 1 pour le moment est de voir une mission de contrôle descendre sur le terrain pour tirer les choses au clair.
Thanks very much, Fabien, for that report. We know it's not easy living in an environment without water. It is just like killing somebody in a hospital. Viewers, we are gradually marching to the end of this program, Experts. The topic of the day is corruption in the environment sector and RED+. we have the Executive Director of Transparency International, Cameroon, Mr. Luken Nyasi Chakunte. Sir, you have just followed the reports. That is an abuse.
Yes, I would say it's not only in Konsamba.
Okay.
We have situations here in Yaoundé, we have areas here around Yaoundé where there's water problem, or even in our houses where we have water twice in a week.
Yeah.
So this is a situation that the government really needs. It's urgent because, like you said, water is life.
Life, yeah.
So the government really needs to look into that issue. Cameroon is endowed with rivers.
Yeah.
And when they say Mungo, Mungo is according to a river. When we say Nyong, it's according to a river.
Yeah.
So we cannot be surrounded by so much river and have difficulty in having access or having water in our houses.
Thanks very much for coming, Mr. Director.
You're welcome.
I wish you honor our next invitation for a program like this.
We shall always, it might not be me, but Transparency International Cameroon is open when receiving an invitation from 7 News.
Televiewers, we have come to the end of this program, but it will be ungrateful if I think this program is successful because of I alone. I will happily thank the technical team. Stefan, you are not left out. Levis Ngono, you are not left out. The only lady who has the name of a soap, Otans Obodo, you are highly respected, as well as Sirin Damba. May God bless you all. Don't go away. Your next program comes up, Club Elite Plus, presented by Amang Tepono. Goodbye. We love you.